So what we're going to do today is we're going to go into the book of Revelation, the very last book. And in chapter 2, we see a mention, a reference to Jezebel. So we're going to pick it up there, and we're going to talk about how the Jezebel spirit manifests not only through people, but in relationships and corporately. So not only individually, but also corporately, in groups. And I don't want to say just in congregations, because this is beyond congregations. This happens in families. It happens in relationships, right? Intimidation and oppression. Yeah, it happens in relationship. We've all experienced it. Unfortunately. Whether the relationship is romantic or not. Whether it's family or friendship. We've all experienced people who try to gain our loyalty through oppression and intimidation. That's abuse. That's the spirit of Jezebel. So in Revelation, beginning in verse 18, chapter 2, verse 18, it says, "To the messenger of the congregation in Thyatira write, the Son of God, who has eyes like a flame of fire, and his feet are like burnished bronze, says this." Now we know that there are 7 messages to 7 congregations, and they are actually specifically addressed to the messenger, to the angel. The word for angel means messenger. That's what the pastor is. That's what the rabbi is. He is the person who hears the message from God and delivers it to people. That's what we do here at Sukkat, right? All we want to do is be based on hearing God. Based on hearing God. We want to teach revelation from the heart of God for the moment that has a prophetic connection. We don't just want to teach knowledge. We're not saying knowledge is bad, but we need revelation. Knowledge gives us information. And we need information. We need background. We need history. But it all needs to serve the purpose of revelation. Because it is only through revelation that we receive transformation. So this is a message that has 2 recipients. So in verse 18, it says, write to the angel, the messenger, to the pastor, to the rabbi at this congregation. Tell him this, write this. But in verse 24, I want you to just quickly go down to verse 24. It says, "But I say to you, the rest who are in Thyatira." So there is a section of this little mini letter, right, that is addressed to the entire congregation. We're going to return to this, but I wanted you to see from the beginning how the beginning of this message is for the leader, the congregational leader, but there will be a place which is addressed to everybody in that congregation. So let's go back up to verse 18. In verse 19, we read that it says, "I know your deeds, your love, your faith, and your service, and your perseverance, and that your deeds of late are greater than at first." The word for deeds, if we were to translate that into the Jewish world, that's mitzvah. I know your mitzvot. I know what you do. And look, it says your love, your faith and your service. Maybe you will say, well, love, okay, I understand love. This is how you help people. And I understand service. This is how you help people. But faith is toward God. That's not towards people, right? Well, the thing is that in the Greek, obviously this is written in the Greek, but also in the Hebrew, faith also means faithfulness. So it means how loyal you are in relationships. So the Lord is saying to this congregational leader, he's saying, listen, I know what you are doing well. You love people. Loving people means doing the things that help them truly grow. Now, sometimes that will be painful. Sometimes you will not be appreciated when you love people and you do for them what they need instead of what they would like for you to do, right? Most people will love for you to give them money and they will love you and say yes to everything that they want you to, agree with them. But that may not be exactly what they need. And sometimes you may have to say, no, let's talk about other things. And that's what the Lord does. Look at it in verse 20. It says, but I have this against you. So here's the Lord speaking to this congregational leader, to this rabbi dude in this particular place. And he says, I know what you're doing well, but I also need to talk to you about what you are not doing well. I have this against you. And there's only one thing that he has against him. It says in verse 20, that you tolerate the woman Jezebel. That you tolerate. That's the one thing you're not doing well. And we need to talk about this. So the Lord's going to, not only is he going to talk to this leader about it, but he's going to show, the Lord's going to show him how he himself deals with the Jezebel spirit. So he's going to say some things to him, but he's also going to tell him, this is how I deal with it. Right? And so we're going to learn how to deal with it. Because the truth is that we ourselves, at one point or another, we also act in oppression and intimidation toward other people. I know I do. I know I have, and I know I can, and I know I do. I probably did it this morning on the way here. Just the way I was driving behind this guy. I was intimidating him. Driving doesn't count, right? Especially in the Metroplex. In the Metroplex. Yeah, when I was in Germany, I had a couple guys drive by me, and I was like, whoops, I think that guy's from Texas. So, verse 20. Let's take a look at a couple things here. We talked about this word tolerate last week. We said that it means, in the Greek, it means to allow, to permit, to do nothing about it. I have this against you, that you've done nothing about this. To justify it. That's not helpful. That's not loving. It's not helpful for the person who is operating under the Spirit. It's not helpful for those who are suffering from this. And we're going to see a little bit about them in a moment. But it says that you tolerate the woman Jezebel who calls herself a prophetess. So here's a position. I want you to insist in calling me this. I am this. And it may very well be a position to which this person was properly inaugurated, properly installed, properly placed, but has been taken into a wrong direction. It says that she teaches and leads my bondservants astray, out of the way, out of the truth, away from the truth, away from worshiping the true God. Right? It says, so that they commit acts of immorality and eat things sacrificed to idols. This word for immorality here, it's a very interesting word. You all know it. In the Greek is porneia. We get the word pornography from this word. But in the ancient world, in the Greek world, it was far more than just pornography. Because a porne was actually a prostitute, male or female. But it's not limited to that world, because it also means any kind of sexual behavior that is outside of what is appropriate. So we see in 1 Corinthians, for example, 1 Corinthians 5, where it talks about the man that was actually living with perhaps his stepmom. Maybe his dad has passed away. And him and his stepmom developed this relationship, and they were living together. That's a forbidden relationship in the Torah. And Paul uses the word porne in relation to that, to what was happening there. So it's any kind of sexual behavior. And it seems then that in part the root of this Jezebel spirit, it probably has something to do with an actual physical, an actual sexual behavior. But I think for the most part, this was spiritual. Because it is talking about things sacrificed to idols. Now we know about this. We know there's a prohibition, even to Gentile believers, to abstain from things sacrificed to idols. And Paul says, I know that idols are nothing, but it's the demons behind the idols. He says, I don't want you to have anything in common with idols. You see, the word common is the word koinonia. You know that word as fellowship. He says, I don't want you to have fellowship with demons. I don't want you to have anything in common. That's what fellowship means. That you and I have something in common. So I don't want you to have anything in common with demons. But because this woman was walking in rebellion, what she was teaching and what she was modeling for the people that were under her teaching was related to demons because of the rebellion. It is a different spirit. We know the passage in which Samuel, the prophet, he speaks to Saul, King Saul, right? And he says, rebellion It says the sin of witchcraft. There is a direct connection between rebellion and the spiritual world and the demonic world. Because when a person walks in rebellion, they have detached themselves from the head, from the authentic leadership. And when that happens, then they expose themselves to another spirit. And that's the source not only of their teaching, but of what they model. Not only the content of their teaching, but also the way they are leading others to do, what they're leading others to do. And so, even though there was probably some actual immorality going on, I think it was, for the most part, I think it was actually the spiritual unfaithfulness that was going on. How she was detached from the real head of this congregation and in rebellion, leading others to rebellion. That's the manifestation of the Jezebel spirit when it is through a person. Of course, we know the root is with Satan in his rebellion against God. So we know that is always the hallmark of the Jezebel spirit. Now, this detachment from the head, it can come, and it does come, especially today, in our world today, a lot of it comes from a spirit of offense. Right? I feel like I can't follow you. You did this, you do this, and I got to have my own thing on the side here. So the people justify themselves. So I will address next week then this spirit of offense, which is huge in our culture today, and very, very much attached to what's going on spiritually in our world today. So this is what this leader, this rabbi, this pastor was tolerating in this congregation. You know, we have real problems in Messianic congregations. And we talked about that. We do talk about that in our congregation, and we are honest about following the traditions of and the commandments of man, blinded. That's a form of spiritual unfaithfulness. And people tolerate that. People tolerate the formation, leaders tolerate the formation of a group underneath them because of fears. Because of lies and fears. And we're not to tolerate that. I was talking to a pastor friend of mine this week, and he said, I like to do everything, I like to save up and do everything without taking loans. And I know that there's a place for taking a loan, even as you build a congregation. But he said, that way I don't feel like I have to please people because of a financial need. And so he feels like he can preach the truth because he doesn't need to appease or keep people happy so that they don't leave and they keep giving. So that's one way that this problem can manifest, of why leaders tolerate this. So how does God deal with the Jezebel spirit? Because he has experience on this, you know. The very first creations that he had, all the angels, right? All of a sudden, one of his archangels, right? One of his main leaders decides to rebel against him and create his own little group underneath him. So he has experience with this. And even Yeshua himself, the devil came to him and he said, hey, exalt me, worship me, get behind my plan. He dealt with this spirit. He dealt with people oppressing him and intimidating him. That's the spirit of Jezebel. He dealt with this directly from the enemy and through people. So he may have a couple things to teach us. So look in verse 21. And let's learn from God how he deals with people who operate under this spirit. Verse 21, it says, I gave her time to repent. Wow, doesn't it sound like contradictory? Like, do not tolerate. I want you to deal with this today. But then he says, you know what? Because I'm not intimidated, I don't have to feel compelled. I don't have to feel obligated to do anything out of fear, out of a lie. I want you, Pastor Man, Rabbi Dude, in this congregation, I want you to be the same. Okay? So I want you to be spiritually aware of what's going on, but not rush into it. Give time. Give time for the person to return to God. And don't just leave it to time. Time doesn't heal anything. Right? We're going to have some actions to help this person return to God. That's what repentance means. To return. To turn around and start walking toward God instead of detaching from the head. So the number one thing that God does is he gives time. I gave her time to repent. And she does not want to repent of her immorality. 22. Behold, I will throw her on a bed of sickness. I will throw her on a bed of sickness. The word sickness, though, is actually not in the Greek. That's interesting. Because then what it says is, I'm going to throw her on a bed. Now, it could be a bed of sickness in other passages, but it could also be a bed of rest. Here's what I gather from that. That in the first step, God is patient, and he wants the leader to trust him for his timing. Right? He's aware of it. He's ready to do something, but he's waiting on the Lord. Tell me what you want me to do. Tell me when you want me to do it. Okay? I'm depending on hearing God. I'm not depending on circumstances. But number two, I think this throwing her onto a bed, I think this means to disengage this person from ministry. Disengage this person from ministry. Just take a seat, so to speak. Take a seat. You're relieved for now. Now that should get their attention, right? I think something's up here. I mean, think about this. Think about you being the boss at work and you having to deal with this. You may take some things off of their plate, right? To help the situation a little bit. See if they will return to God. So disengage them from ministry. It says, and those who commit adultery with her into great tribulation. Now, this is the book of Revelation. You don't take lightly when the book of Revelation says great tribulation. This is heavy. So, I think a leader needs to understand and not panic when someone who maybe he knows is acting under the Jezebel spirit begins to experience tribulation, begins to experience problems. Now, you got to be careful, though, because you don't want to be Job's friend. Because Job experienced tribulation, not for any fault of his own. But when you see tribulation come, you're not going to interpret it. You're not going to say, oh, it's because of... You walk with the person, and you're patient with the person. You walk with them. And you make sure they are connecting with the Lord. And the Lord will make it clear to them. Amen. Yeah, I'm dealing with this in your life. And they'll tell you. You shepherd people. You walk along them. Right? Verse 23. And now will kill her children with pestilence. Again, the word pestilence in the book of Revelation, this is huge. You're talking about plagues. You understand the purpose of the plagues. What could be some plagues? You know, when we see the plagues on Egypt, they lost their crops. They lost their modes of transportation. You know, camels and things. Those are plagues. Those could be plagues. You don't know why they're in a person's life, but you're going to walk along with them. You're not going to panic. You're going to pray for them, and you may ask them or help them understand, you know, what could the Lord be dealing with here? And you help them be free. This is your goal. To help them return to the Father. So they're free. They're free from the spirit of Jezebel. They're free from rebellion and detachment from the head. It says, I will kill her children with pestilence, and all the congregations will know that I am he who searches the minds and hearts. That's why Yeshua at the beginning says, I am the one who has eyes. What does it say again? In verse 18. The Son of God who has eyes like a flame of fire. He searches. He searches the minds and the hearts. And he ministers to the person. He brings it to mind. This is why we ask, Father, is there any lie that I have believed? Is there any event you want to deal with? He searches. And he brings things that we were like, oh, you want to talk about that? Okay. I didn't remember that, but this is how he deals with a Jezebel spirit, with people who are tolerating it in their lives, spreading it in the community, in the workplace, in the group. But the leader helps them work that out of them. It says in the end of 24, it says, I place no other burden on you. I place no other burden on you. This is the same word, actually. This I place is the same word earlier when it says, I will throw her into a bed. That verb to throw is the same here, to place. So I'm not going to come to you with restrictions. That's what a burden is restrictions on you. I'm not going to place restrictions on you that are going to make you trip and fail. I'm not going to ask you to do things that are just setting you up for failure. What I'm doing is I'm helping you return to the Father. That's how the Lord deals with it. Verse 26. He who overcomes and he who keeps my mitzvot, my commandments, who loves other people until the end, to him I will give authority over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. As the vessels of the potter are broken to pieces, as I also have received authority from my Father, and I will give him the morning star. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the congregations. What's the point here? The point here is that he is the potter. He will be the potter when he rules the nations, because he is the potter. And here's the thing. The potter breaks the vessel to redo it, to remake it. He wants to break the person who was operating under the spirit of Jezebel. He wants to break this person, not for destruction, but to remake them. But he also is dealing with those who are suffering under this oppression and intimidation. He is their potter also, and he wants to remake them. And so our proper attitude towards the potter is not to say, you have no right to break me and remake me. You have to say, help me understand. Help me understand. I want to cooperate with you. I want you to do your will in my life. God is the potter. He breaks people. So that he can save them. So he can deliver them. Let me finish with a story of a person who was operating under me, detached from me. This is years ago, nothing to do with Sukkat, Shalom, or anyone here. But I was in the process of starting a Spanish-speaking congregation at our home. And we were having a great time. It was beautiful. And I had this guy who had a PhD, not in theology, but he had a PhD, very smart dude. And his wife sang in the little worship that we had. And he was very helpful in terms of physically serving. But I could see he was detached. He was detached. So one time I said to him, I'm not interested in having your hand, in having your hands. I'm not even interested in having your wallet. I really want to have your heart. I really want to. Because I know if I have your heart, I have your hands and I have your wallet. But I don't sense that I have your heart. And so I asked him this question to prove to him that his heart wasn't with me. I said, let me ask you this question. Am I your pastor? And he said, no. No. I'm thankful he was honest. And he said no. And, it was one of those occasions in my life when I started something and the Lord asked me I want you to close it down. I went to Israel, while we were working on this, and in Israel, the Lord spoke to me and he said, I want you to close down that congregation. Like, why? We're having so much fun. It's going really well. And so I had to come home and say, guys, we need to shut it down. So he was off, right? But he carries this. And he went somewhere else. So I don't know anything about that. But what about you? We have a lot of faces that come and go, and I want to know. Not for my sake, but for your sake. Am I your pastor? Amen. How many pastors do you have? We're trying to build here something that I need to entrust you with authority. So I don't want your hands and I don't want your wallet. I want all of you. Amen. I want you to be attached. It's okay if you're attached somewhere else. That's fine. You need to be attached somewhere. But if you're here, I really want you to be here. Now, I'm not saying you can't visit here. I'm not even opposed. We have people that come here and go to Gateway Church. We have people in our worship who are not members, who they come to help in the worship. That's fine. I understand that. But if your intention is to make this your house, then I'm asking you, are you really here? Are you really here? Are you really attached? And if you're not supposed to be, that's fine as well. I just want you to figure it out and be at the place where you're supposed to be. Because we're going places and I need to hand you authority. That's why. That's why. At some point, the pastor in this congregation of Thyatira handed over authority to this lady that was operating under this spirit. And he needed to circle back around and say, okay, let's reevaluate this. Where are you at? Because I can see some things I can hear some things that are not according to the house here, not according to the heart, right? Let's reevaluate this. Let's go together. Let's go along. And there's real concrete, significant things for each one of us here, but we have to be engaged. Does that work? Mm-hmm. Amen. Amen. Let's pray.